as Israel pursues total victory, they may perversely, or ironically anyway, be losing Washington's support. Or are they? Certainly a lot of confusing signals coming out of Washington these days. Not much confusion coming out of the Tel Aviv from the office of the prime minister, though, as we'll see here in a minute. And we're going to try to figure out, what does that mean when you have these conflicting signals here, and different opinions, different statements, but you see the actions flowing underneath it without much change. You got to wonder what's really going on. Well, to help us untangle some of this mess today and provide some clarity for you is our show favorite, Matthew Hoh, former Marine commander, former State Department official, and all-around great guy. Matt, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Danny. Good to see you.
Always good to have you here. And even though we touch on some tough, challenging situations here, it's always great to have you on because you can provide such, bottom line clarity to what's going on here, whether it's the kind of story that maybe someone in Washington might not want to hear, but our viewers definitely appreciate and deserve. So we're going to get right into this one because we have some, like I said, some rather divergent views coming out of Washington. We're going to look at that part of the equation first of all, because there seems to be a change in a positive direction. There does seem to be some movement in the U.S. position. I think, as you and I have discussed on a number of occasions, that there's some disappointment that even though there's been this egregious loss of life of innocent people in the Palestinian that are trapped inside the Gaza Strip there, there had been just blanket, flat out support from the Washington, especially the administration, really no matter what. It almost didn't even matter what was happening on the ground. Everybody kept running back to October 7th and saying that whatever happened there justified anything that the Israeli forces were doing. But that's starting to see a bit of a change. And in fact, we saw some of it last week, I believe it was. Last week on Thursday, I believe, when Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna grilled the Secretary of Defense pretty hard.
Mr. Secretary, about how many Palestinian women and children have been killed by Israel since October 7th?
It's over 25,000.
Mr. Secretary, last week, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights warned that any transfer of weapon or ammunition to Israel violates international law. About how many precision-guided munitions has the United States given Israel since the beginning of the war?
I don't have that number at my fingertips, but we have endeavored.
Mr. Secretary, it's about 21,000 precision-guided munitions. The head of the World Food Program has said that the Palestinian children are starving. Extremist settler Stomrich, Israel's finance minister, stopped American flour, which our taxpayers paid for to get into Gaza. If Israel again ever stops American-paid aid from getting into Gaza, will you commit to not sending future arms cells?
Again, that's not my decision.
Sorry, just one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of Austin because he's like punting when it gets hard. Yeah, it's not my call. Anyway.
Yeah, you're only the Secretary of Defense, man.
I know. It's not like he's anybody important that I should give him some slack. Wait a minute.
But you know what? I had this conversation yesterday, Danny, with somebody about this exact thing, about the willingness of those at the most senior levels to still pass the buck. And I had this conversation with Richard Holbrooke, who was the special representative for Afghanistan, Pakistan. He was Barack Obama's guy for Afghanistan. And when I was resigning and I had to talk with him, he said, you don't have to, this is not on you. You don't have to worry about these decisions. The only person who has to worry about this is Barack Obama. And, I was talking to the guy who was the senior civilian for Afghanistan and Pakistan policy, and he was brushing off any degree of responsibility he had for what was going to occur in Afghanistan, what was taking place there, what the policies were, what he was implementing. And I've seen that with other senior officials, both elected and, unelected, whether they're appointed or career, as well as members of Congress, this willingness, just like we saw with the Secretary of Defense, to be like, well, no, that's above my pay grade. And so I think that's one of the ways that these people are able to be in these positions and not have any sense of complicity, any sense of role, let alone any guilt, shame, regret for things that they've taken part in, whether those things have been clear war crimes or abysmal counterproductive policy failures, right, or illegal wars, whatever they be. It really is. I think it's something, a requirement for these people to be in those positions, to have that ability to say, you know what, I'm not the one responsible for this, even though.
And you saw Ro Khanna try to set the stage for him by going, we've given how many precision guided weapons that have been used on the Palestinian people that have killed a lot of these women and children. Remind me of that number again that we gave to the Israelis, which resulted in this. Ergo, we're complicit in what's going on here. And went right over his head. He didn't even accept the premise.
Right, and this isn't an issue where, I'm trying to think of something like witty or comical or funny to say, in terms of like to describe but I'm just, failing to, to describe the disparity or the dissonance that's occurring here. This is not just some this is not just some lackadaisical, run-of-the-mill daily administrative issue. This isn't a political issue in the sense of a decision coming from the White House that is purely a partisan political decision. These are decisions. These are policies that are being made and executed that are contributing to a genocide, that are causing the ethnic cleansing of people, that are a collective punishment, an organized murder and destruction of a people. I mean, so this is nothing that can get brushed off as something that shouldn't be a key pivoting. This is, the expression, and I've heard that this was a favorite expression of Joe Biden. I heard this from people who work for him on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, that one of Joe Biden's favorite expressions was, "Don't die on a small cross." This is not a small cross to die on. I mean, if there's ever going to be anything to be nailed up for, to put yourself out for, right, to take responsibility for and say, I won't be complicit, this is it.
Yeah.
And so I know
you don't like to go here because it's talking about you, but I mean, you did that and sacrificed a promising career in the State Department on something that's comparatively was a lot lower threshold. Just we had bad policy in Afghanistan in 2009, I think it was, when you first made that call. Now that we're talking about something orders of magnitude higher. Now, on the positive side, there are some that seem to be coming around, and we got to give props to Bernie Sanders, who on Sunday said this.
Well, I think, first of all, this is something, Alex, they've been thinking about for a while, because what they see, what you see, what I see, is almost an unprecedented humanitarian disaster. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of children facing starvation. We're talking about Israeli bombs of making it impossible for humanitarian aid to get to places that is needed, that the borders are being blockaded, and aid is unable to get through. So I think what the president is doing is an important step forward, but we need to do more. We need to tell Netanyahu and his right-wing government that they're going to have to open those borders. The United States of America, and I think the rest of the world, is not going to allow hundreds of thousands of kids to starve to death. So we need a new approach to Israel. For many, many years, we have given them a lot of money. Recently, there was a vote. I voted against it to give them another $14 billion. My view, not another nickel for Netanyahu's government if he's going to continue this wholesale slaughter of the Palestinian people.
Now, you can say that both Khanna and Bernie Sanders, again, both Democrats, talking about a Democratic administration, but they do have a reputation for being willing to say things that are not popular. Almost it makes it a little bit less of an impact, as opposed to somebody else who maybe isn't in that category, willing to die on this big cross for something like this. Do you see any possibility of anybody else moving in that direction?
I think possibly after today, after the presidential primaries, today's Super Tuesday. If after today, in the next couple of weeks, as more primaries pop up later, you see a concentrated political effort like we saw in Michigan last week, where you had more than 100,000 people vote no preference, as well as 40,000 other people vote for Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson. I think if we see that again today and in the coming weeks, you will see more Democrats begin to say, one, right? They'll see that there is a danger. There's a political threat here,
cost.
but also too, they have the strength. They've been given political capital. I mean, that's something that's so important for people to understand.
That's a good point.
Right, that politicians need political capital. They are political animals. Like, I'm always shocked, and I do this myself too. When we're dismayed, we're frustrated, when we're exhausted by the fact that politicians act like politicians. I mean, so you have even if they're right, even if they're your color, they're on your side, they're blue or red or green or whatever, yellow for the libertarians or whatever color you are, even if they're your color, you still have to recognize that they are politicians who have to make political choices, political calculations, political decisions, and you need to give them capital. You need to give them some type of whether it's a bed of support, whether it is a threat to use against somebody else, whether it's some type of currency for which to make political transactions with. I mean, they need.
And I'm curious because so Michigan, there was a substantial Muslim population in there. And although I understand from looking at the numbers, it wasn't just the Muslims that were voting uncommitted to send this signal, because there was lots of others. Do you have any knowledge whether in any of the other Super Tuesday states there's even the possibility of a protest vote like that against Biden?
Minnesota has a fairly organized effort from what I've seen, and then there are scattershot efforts around the country. A lot of them kind of a bit coming late to it.
Because other states don't have the option of voting uncommitted, right? I mean, they either vote
exactly. It all depends upon the state. So here in North Carolina, we have a no preference. So the North Carolina Democratic Party kept Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips off the ballot, which has done nothing but made people in the North Carolina Democratic Party even more upset with the party. I mean, it's a stupid thing to do. They were only going to get a few percent. Here in North Carolina, Phillips and Williamson were only going to get a few percent of the vote. But now there is a no preference on the ballot here in North Carolina. And an effort began last week to get people to vote no preference in the Democratic primary. If you even really get, say, 10, 20, 30,000 votes that way in North Carolina, that would be a big deal because of North Carolina's demographics, the way we vote here, the way the power structure is. That would be a big message. And the fact that this could be a close state in November. So we'll see as the day goes on. We get the results tonight, whether or not any other states had the same type of turnout to show a protest vote, a vote against genocide, a vote against Biden that we saw in Michigan last week. But we certainly didn't see the coordination, the organization, the mobilization like we saw in Michigan to get people to go out. And, I mean, that was a really well done effort on their part. They put a lot of resources behind it. They brought a lot of people from out of the state to come in to support this. They got people, they got members of the Democratic Party to endorse no preference. So they did a great job there in Michigan. And unfortunately, these other states that are doing it now, if they have the option, as you pointed out, most states don't, I believe. If they do, they're coming to it a bit late.
I see. Well, I guess we're going to find out. But now let's actually look a little bit at the nearly presumptive Democratic nominee, Joe Biden. He has moved just a little bit more in the direction of standing up to Netanyahu, relatively speaking. Now, there was a little bit of news, actually a lot of news yesterday on this past weekend, where the vice president, Kamala Harris, made one of the strongest statements that she's made to date, really on any topic. We'll get to that in just a second. But she was kind of emphasizing and I guess doubling down on something that the president himself said about the middle of last month. He didn't say it with quite that much enthusiasm as she did. Here's how he put it.
First of all, I've had extensive conversations with the Prime Minister of Israel over the last several days, almost an hour each. And I've made the case, and I feel very strongly about it, that there has to be a temporary ceasefire to get the prisoners out, to get the hostages out. And that is underway. I'm still hopeful that that can be done. And in the meantime, I don't anticipate. I'm hoping that that the Israelis will not make any massive land invasion in the meantime.
So you see that he's even then he's walking back. Well, I hope that they don't do this. We should have done, but we'll wait and see. We could be coming up. Now that was the 16th of February. Now you may also remember rather infamously when he was on with Seth Meyers the other day, and he had that ice cream cone. Bad optics on its own merit, but I think that by the end of the weekend that we'll have one. Well, the end of the weekend came, and we didn't have one. So he sent his vice president out with a pretty stern message of her own.
And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table.
Okay, there must be an immediate ceasefire. Obviously, she's not going to get sent out there and make that statement unless her boss tells her exactly that's what she's going to do. So it would seem that he was a little bit miffed that his comment at Seth Meyers there about the end of the weekend with a deal, and there wasn't a deal. Then he's like saying, all right, I'm going to send a shot across the bow. Well, here's how that shot across the bow was received. This, let's see, that's from today. What I'm about to show you from Netanyahu responding.
The war continues and will continue until the end, until we achieve all our goals. The cruelty of the kidnappers, eliminating Hamas, and ensuring that it will no longer pose a threat to Israel, sparing no one. We will persevere and continue our relentless fight on land, sea, and air until we achieve total and undeniable victory.
Total and undeniable victory. He didn't say anything about a ceasefire there. Didn't say anything about any kind of a deal for anything other than a thumb in the nose of the vice president and the president and the Congress, everybody else. And Bernie Sanders saying not another nickel until all this stuff happens. And now then we're not doing any of that. And he says we're going to continue on while probably saying, but still give me your cash.
Right.
We'll see what's going to happen here. But how does that strike you?
Well, I mean, in that point about still give us your cash, he's standing in front of that F-35. Which is not just being utilized to carry out this genocide in Gaza. It'll also be utilized in any war with Lebanon. But also too, the United States just approved, in the last weeks or so, sale of 25 more F-35s to Israel. I mean, so I think that use of the F-35 there, the reason why they chose that as the backdrop was to send that message. One, giving us the finger, but also two, reminding us that we are going to continue to supply them with the things that they want. And the fact that Netanyahu says these things in this manner, in such a dramatic, theatrical, well-produced manner, really shows how not just how arrogant they are, but how confident they are that they can control the United States. And they also are, I think, letting us know that they understand that this is all for show on the United States part, that the White House is not going to do anything serious. The White House is not going to do anything that will actually put real pressure on Netanyahu. Yeah, Benny Gantz can show up and they can meet with him if they want. But that's not the type of leverage that's concerning Netanyahu and the IDF right now.
Matt, what kind of along this line, what adds a little insult to injury for me is the fact that you may have seen this over the last weekend or so, that we have been airdropping in some relief supplies to the people of Palestine. There's now talk about a naval incursion, basically, to where we're bringing things in from the sea. And I'm like, hang on a second. Why is the United States of America bringing in airlifting supplies to the people of Palestine that the Israeli Defense Forces have under siege? By every right and every logic, that should be them that's doing it. If anything, the White House should say, get the damn airlift supplies off your jets, stop the bombs for, slow them down for a while and drop some airlift supplies, something like that. As opposed to saying, you're just going to continue to fire all the bombs that we're giving you. You're going to continue to use all the money that we have, the planes, et cetera. and then we're going to do your work on supplying the Palestinian people with even the meager supplies that's coming in. I think that they should just full stop say, not like Bernie said, the president of the United States should say, not one more bomb, not one more bullet, nothing until you open up all the damn gates and all of this supply stuff come in to alleviate after you have initiated a 6-week ceasefire. You don't want to do that? It's your country. You can do whatever you want, but you're on your own. Instead, we do their dirty work for them on the humanitarian side. Matt, what in the hell's going on with this?
Well, it just shows how powerful the Israeli lobby is, that they're able to have this type of control over the United States through its political process, through its electoral system, through its campaign finance, through the legalized bribery that our political system really is, that the Israeli lobby can control the United States. I mean, you're watching the United States be completely humiliated here by a country that we have given billions and billions of dollars. Where the White House and most of Congress, with the exception of a few Republican holdouts, are doing everything they can to give Israel $14 billion more, as the Israelis humiliate us while they make us complicit in their genocide. And so what you see, though, is, again, the political pressures on Biden. So they're trying to alleviate that. They have Kamala Harris come out and speak about a ceasefire. But it's important to note they're very adamant, 6 weeks, which, as other commentators have noted, that roughly matches up with the length of the presidential primaries, right? So please, Israel, stop fighting, stop making us look bad during this primary season. And you could, because I think,
but Matt, they're not even doing that. They're not even doing that. Oh, that little chicken bone.
And then the dog and pony show continues with this airdrop, which, again, a huge humiliation for the United States. I don't know how you can look at it any other way. As you were saying, Danny, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of trucks lined up. You can see the line of trucks on satellite. That's how big this line of trucks is, waiting to get into Gaza. The Israelis just will not let them in. The United States cannot do anything to get the Israelis to let these trucks in. So we do this airlift. We airdrop roughly 15 pallets of food from 3 C-130s. Denny, you've been on a C-130.
Yeah.
These things are not big. They hold 5 pallets. If people want to understand how much 5 pallets is, as you look at those trucks as they go by, 4 pallets fit on a truck. So from each of those planes, you're talking about 1.25 truckloads. So not even 4 trucks worth of food were dropped.
But it makes great video, man. There's parachutes coming down and all that.
And from what I understand, some of that ended up in the water. So it might not even been retrieved. And then you're talking about, so again, 4 trucks worth, when literally hundreds, thousands of trucks are lined up outside. This is a completely inane way to deliver aid. There was no coordination done with people on the ground. The stuff was just kicked out the back of those aircraft. It landed on the beach, some in the water. Who got it? Who knows? So it wasn't like as if it was going to be distributed in any manner that was organized or effective. And it was so minuscule. You're talking a population of 2.3 million. So, multiply that times 3. You need 6.6 million meals a day. And the United States dropped 38,000. I mean, like, the whole thing is just such a farce. It's so obscene. I mean, this is just an obscene tragedy, an obscene criminal act that's taking place with this type of theater. But it goes back to something that Joe Biden was saying in the clip 2 or 3 previously, when he's saying how we hope the invasion of Rafah doesn't happen. I mean, he says hope like 3 times in that clip. Yeah. And that just encapsulates American strategy writ large in terms of our foreign policy, our militarized foreign policy. This hope that somehow things are going to get better. This hope that somehow things in Ukraine are going to turn around. This hope that somehow the Israelis are going to attune with their better angels.
Hope, despite the evidence to the contrary. Right. That's the thing that's important. I mean, I can hope that lots of things happen, and maybe they will, maybe they won't.
Yeah.
But when you hope against substantial evidence that the contrary will happen, that's when it gets dangerous, not just stupid.
Right. I mean, you and I saw that in our time in Iraq, right? How long, the years it took for the United States to negotiate with the insurgency. All those years we could have done that. Those early years in Iraq where thousands were killed. But it was this idea that, we hope things are going to get better. We hope things are going to turn around. We just have to keep, persisting and like telling a kid to keep going out there and keep shooting free throws. You'll get better. You just gotta stay persistent with it. You gotta stay consistent with it. You gotta put the effort in.
Matt, you can probably see on your screen here, you were talking about the parachutes landing in the water. Gary just found that. Look at this.
Yeah.
Look how many just hit the water. Now, also look, when these things are coming down, you just have people mass out here. I wonder how many of them got hit by these things.
Well, I guess that's why they do it on the beach. It's just a lot more space, but also too, people don't get hit by it. But I mean, exactly.
But look at some of these right here. Looks like these people are just about to get hit.
Right.
They did.
Maybe some people did.
Crap.
I mean,
Well
those
done,
quad
Gary, by the
cons, we call them, C boxes or whatever we call them in the Marine Corps. I mean, those things are I don't know how fast they're traveling when they're coming down, but they'll kill you if they hit you. But now what happens? There's no coordination done. Who gets these things? How does it get to the neediest? Although I guess at this point in Gaza, everyone is the neediest. So any type of triage is kind of superfluous because everyone needs it.
Okay. Now, Matt, I want to kind of change the topic here a little bit. Going back and sticking with that idea of hope against evidence here.
Mhm.
So we had that clip there earlier today of Netanyahu very brashly standing up there and said, we're going to go on to total victory. Now, he said, I guess maybe it was last week, I think, that, hey, we're no longer talking about months anymore. It's weeks. We're just talking about weeks. And this thing's going to be over. We have, I think, like 4 battalions of Hamas left, and then we're going to destroy them. And then the war will finally be over. Now, what do you think is going to be what Netanyahu's going to wake up the day after somebody in his headquarters puts that last little identification up on his war board that says the last battalion has now been destroyed? Do you think he's going to go, yay, the war is over and peace can come onto Israel and everything is going to be great? What happens that morning?
Once we begin the Rafah operation, the intense phase of the fighting is weeks away from completion, not months, weeks away from completion. And that is, we've already destroyed 18 out of the 24 Hamas terrorist battalions. So we have and 4 of them are concentrated in Rafah. We can't leave the last Hamas stronghold without taking care of it. Obviously, we have to do it. But understand, too, that I've asked the army to submit to me a double plan. First, to enable the evacuation of the Palestinian civilians in Gaza, and obviously, second, to destroy the remaining Hamas battalions. That gets us a real distance towards the completion of our victory. And that we're not going to give it up. If we have a deal, it'll be delayed somewhat, but it'll happen. If we don't have a deal, we'll do it anyway. It has to be done because total victory is our goal, and total victory is within reach, not months away, weeks away, once we begin the operation.
Gary, you're on fire today, man. Getting that stuff up there. But what do you think about that, Matt? Is he going to have total victory the day after that 4th battalion is wiped off, or what's he going to find?
Well, it's what's he trying to accomplish here when he says these types of things, right? I mean, we all know the idea of total victory is ludicrous. I mean, it's probably going to happen the day after they say, hey, yes, we've destroyed all 24 Hamas battalions. Hamas is going to fire as many rockets as they can towards Tel Aviv, right? I mean, so this idea,
even as you and I talked about before, there's who knows what the number will actually be in weeks from now. Maybe 40,000 people killed. Tens of thousands of women and children. What does he think all the male surviving members of those families are going to do? Right. I mean, if you thought Hamas was bad before, what do you think about people who've had their families wiped out? They may not be called Hamas, but the anger and the hatred towards Israel will be off the freaking charts.
Certainly, if you're a young man or a young woman, if your whole family's been destroyed, what do you have to lose? I mean, this is what happened. This is what the Russians saw after their time in Chechnya. You had the Black Widows, right? These young women who carried out a wave of suicide bombings against Russia in the, going back 20 years or so, in the sense that they had nothing left to lose. Their families have been destroyed, right? I mean, so that's just, one aspect of this larger idea of revenge, of building sympathy or not sympathy, but seeing violent resistance as your only salvation, as the only way forward. And if everything around you has been destroyed, right, that natural impulse that you have towards supporting the resistance or being a part of the resistance, because of this decades-long occupation, because of what has occurred to your family for generations, because of this brutal assault, I mean, all these things, but you add in the personal connection that your family has been destroyed. What you're going to get out of this is something much worse than anything we've seen so far. This idea that there's any type of victory in the sense of bringing stability or security. The only thing that Netanyahu and Israel can do after this destruction of Gaza is to subjugate the people. That's the only way they can go forward with any hope of not having, there I just used the word hope, without having that type of constant threat from an insurgent Palestinian resistance that has just been strengthened by this genocide. It put it, so how they're going to go forward thinking that anything other than having 2 divisions of infantry reinforced by an armor unit in Gaza to control it and subjugate the population, to keep anything from boiling over, to keep anything from spilling over, from keeping anything from getting out. I mean, basically, how else could you prevent a resurgent militant force from launching attacks again after you've committed these months of atrocity?
Now let's look at the practical aspects of this too, Matt, because all those images that Gary was just now showing of the just absolute wanton destruction of the ability to even live in the Gaza Strip. So there's virtually no economy right now. Nobody has a job because there's literally nothing to do. So on the day after, how does Israel even, I don't even know if let is the right word, but facilitate the continued existence? Now, I know that their primary objective, at least many in their government, is to drive out all the Palestinians so that they're in Egypt, Jordan, who knows where. They could care less. They just want them out. But if they fail that, and I don't see any political will anywhere outside of Israel to facilitate that. So the likelihood is that there's going to be this nothing but Nagasaki style moon crater of a city left over after this is over, and there's going to be nothing but tents. How does Israel maintain life for 2 million people in any case? And I mean, how is it going to be rebuilt? It'll take decades for that to be rebuilt. And what are these people going to do in the meantime? How are they going to navigate that?
Exactly. You're basically talking about a death camp. You're basically talking about what was, we called Gaza before this a concentration camp or a prison. This is basically now going to be a death camp where people are slowly dying. There's no infrastructure. The Israelis control everything going in as they did before, but now they're really not letting anything in. So what do they do then? At your point, and the point, is that they will fight back. Unless Israel is successful in getting their ethnic cleansing campaign to reach its fruition and get these people out of Gaza, they are stuck with a population that's just not hostile, it's just not resistant, but wants revenge. How could that not be? To your point you're making earlier, Danny, right? If you're a young man or a young woman in this, how could you not pick up a rifle? Would any of us watching this not do the same thing? Right. I mean, so particularly when so much of what Israel is doing is justified as a response to October 7th. And this, of course, is the whole folly of violence, right? Violence begets violence. So, okay, you're arguing that this is justified because of October 7th. Well, the Palestinians are saying October 7th was justified for the history that came before it. And now the history that's going to come will be of the Palestinians responding to this genocide. How are you going to control that, Israel? What are you going to do about this? I mean, this is something that really, I think is I don't think the Israelis know. Because again, if they don't get the Palestinians out, then the best they can hope is just to keep the Palestinians so immiserated that they are lifeless, that they are incapable of resisting. I mean, basically keep them in a death camp so that there can be nothing organized, nothing formed, nothing done that actually resembles any threat to Israel. And we know that's not going to happen either. So are they looking at then having to garrison Gaza? They'll bring settlers in, but that will only lead to a violence, between the settlers and the Palestinians. I mean, so going forward here, the idea that I think which the White House has, because I think the White House has this idea that just get through with Rafah, just get it over with, plant your flag of victory, and then we could put this behind us. I think I've said to you before, I think Joe Biden's not going to run. I think they're going to pull him before the convention, or nominate someone else at the convention, maybe a governor like
Newsom.
like Pritzker or Newsom or somebody like that, right? Somebody who has no connection to foreign policy, so that they can run their campaign and say that was the old guy. That wasn't me. I wasn't in charge of that genocide. I mean, I think, but even then, the White House, they're hoping that what that means then, when this is finally done, this phase of this operation is finally done, they're hoping that means the dying ends, the misery ends, the suffering ends, and they just go back to this reconstruct. They go to this reconstruction.
Okay, hang on a second. If that was the plan, and who knows whether it is, it's plausible, certainly, for many reasons that is their intention. But if that was the plan, then that would be even more reason for the administration to right now do Israel a huge favor and say, not one more nickel until this stops. Right. And there's going to be an immediate ceasefire, or you are completely on your own. And because that's the only thing that will force the stop of the killing, and then say, now we will continue to give you some money if there is a reform in the way things are done. And that starts with this massive inflow and a plan to sustain it for food to the Palestinians. And there damn well better be a two-state solution on the table, because Biden has said, in fact, I think, Gary, you still have this one here. This is from earlier in the war, where Biden publicly went out and said, this is actually our objective.
I made it clear to the Israelis that to Bibi and to his war cabinet, that I think the only ultimate answer here is a two-state solution that's real.
Okay, don't say that if you don't mean it. If because that's just another humiliation for us to have them thumb their nose at us and not do anything, and we'll still give them the F-35s and the billions of dollars, et cetera. But this is the golden opportunity for him to say, this has been our position from the beginning. It's our position now. Now it's doomsday for you. Either you change these things or you do this on your own. If Biden is gonna not run in, actually by election day, then he's got all the freedom in the world to do this, as opposed to letting us continue to be humiliated. Because I assure you, whatever their intent, the whole Democratic Party is going to be tarred with this if it goes down this way.
Absolutely, in a sense that this will affect the entire Democratic down ballot, right? And it's going to affect whether or not people turn out, they just don't show up, or they're voting against the Democrats. They're withholding their vote. So they decide, I'm going to vote for the Republicans. Not that the Republicans would be any better. In many ways, they might be worse. But I mean, you see this constant humiliation. I mean, you have the administration saying consistently, as well as members of Congress, two-state solution. And the Israelis couldn't be firmer. There will be no two-state solution. I mean, their parliament, their Knesset, just passed a thing a couple of weeks ago saying there's not going to be a two-state solution. I mean, and so you see, even with Kamala Harris saying we need a ceasefire, we demand a ceasefire right now. And then what do the Israelis do? They don't send their negotiators to Cairo. They hold their negotiators back from going to meet at the negotiations over some pretext about a list not being provided by Hamas or some nonsense like that. So, I mean, they're totally in control here. The Israeli lobby takes its orders from Tel Aviv. And that lobby is so powerful, has so much influence, whether to reward or to punish members of Congress, that the Democrats will follow what the Israeli lobby tells them to do. I mean, and this is a consequence of our political system. Unless we have a time machine, go back and get rid of our legalized bribery system, as well as require, not allow foreign governments to be able to lobby our Congress, the way AIPAC and others do, this was always going to happen. At some point, this was going to occur, where the United States would be put into this place where it was forced to go along in a humiliating manner, in an illegal manner, in a morally horrid manner, the actions of Israel, because this is the system we built. This is the reality we constructed. So all great and good to be taking that money from AIPAC and other Israeli lobbyists until, oh, wow, they're committing genocide. Well, there's nothing really we can do about it other than make some statements. Maybe we'll do a dog and pony show, drop some stuff out of an aircraft. But really, come on, Israel, hurry up, get this done, because they're so afraid. They're so afraid that even just one thing that makes the Israelis truly upset will cause electoral consequences for them, that they will not get the support from the lobby that they need. That support will go to either the Republicans or possibly a third party candidate like Robert Kennedy, or even a no labels candidate if they run one. And that will have not just the consequence in the White House, but also in the Senate and House.
Okay, look, Matt, here's all I'm asking for. You did what you're suggesting here. You did it when your income depended on you just going along and listening to, I can't remember his name right now, the guy you just mentioned at the top of the show, where he was saying, just don't worry about it. That's what most of them are doing. But you said, no, I can't not worry about it. I'm not able to. I have to do this because out of principle. And you outright resigned. What I'm asking for here is a lower threshold. You don't have to resign from Congress. Find new funding sources, whatever, but do the right thing because it's the right thing. Now, I know I'm probably, even on the comments here, probably people are going to start laughing like, oh yeah, like anybody in Congress is going to do that. Okay, fair enough. I accept that. But there's got to be some out there who are willing to stand up and finally say, you can keep your money. I don't care. I have to do what's morally right. Do you see anybody on the Democratic Party or the Republican Party for that matter who might possibly be willing to stand up and say something firm like that to save people's lives?
I mean, I think we've seen it, if we've seen it. And it was early on. It was, Rashida Tlaib and Cori Bush, the members of the squad. And even some of those members were more quiet than you would hope from progressive Democratic Party members. And if you go to, like, say, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Twitter and you look up her tweets on this, it's few and far between. I mean, so they have really, even the ones that are progressive, the ones that you would expect to be good on this issue, have largely remained quiet. There's about 65 members of Congress who've called for a ceasefire in some way or form, but many of them have been very meek comments. And to your point about doing something about it, about do some form of obstruction, do something. I mean, Bernie Sanders talked about how he tried to get the money for Israel stripped out. He knew that was a losing effort, right? But so if you identify this as genocide, if you have this sickness about you of what you're seeing and what the United States is taking part in, then why do you not do something like, say, Tommy Tuberville did last year, when he held up the promotion of generals for like 8 months or however long. I mean, I don't agree with why he was doing it.
I don't agree with that, but there are mechanisms.
There are mechanisms, and he showed that. And if that's what you want, I mean, like, so it's not being done. They're refusing. You're not seeing that type of leadership, with a few exceptions. But even then, it's some of the I believe some of the progressive squad members who are most vocal on this also don't have primary challengers, and they are in a gerrymandered district where they're going to be reelected anyway. So some of the outrage may be a little, I don't want to say false, but more loud or more realistic in their sense, in practical terms, that they're not going to receive any punishment for their outrage. But yeah, all of this, we're looking at this, it just, these dark days that we're in, and where this goes and what can come next from it is something that really does worry me.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in a sense of how could this
is actually a matter of life and death. What we're talking about here is not just political prompting or just, making a protest vote or something like that. We're talking that it's a literal life and death for other human beings somewhere that we can stop. We actually can stop this with our actions, with our money, with our, if we'll use the political leverage that we have, diplomatic leverage, we can. And by being silent, we're in a sense being complicit in what's going on, because when we have the leverage, we aren't pulling them and people are dying every single day. And it's
Right.
kids. How can, I'm sorry, I've said this before, but I gotta ask, the United States used to be overwhelmingly the country on the whole planet that would have their heartstrings broken when they see kids being blown up and women being blown up, and or like that picture Gary had up a minute ago where all the little kids were holding their little bowls up just to get something out there to eat, and we're doing nothing. We're not taking that one right there. How does that not break the heart of every American, no matter what political party or anything else? How do we look at that and just say, yeah, I'm just not going to worry about the consequences?
So over the last 2 days, so Sunday and Monday, I believe, or maybe it was Saturday or Sunday, you had 16 Palestinian children starve to death, right? And that's only going to increase. It's only going to, right?
Yeah, last Friday it was 4. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
one.
So how many, right? So you're talking about 8 a day. It's going to be 10 a day soon, 15 a day. It's going to start accelerating. How many? What's the number? How many kids have to starve to death?
To death.
To death.
Do you know how painful it is to starve to death?
And these are, of course, the smallest children. You're talking about babies. You're talking about infants. Talking about toddlers. These are the children starving to death. What's the number? What's the number for when the United States actually does something about this? Certainly in terms of children being destroyed by bombs, being ripped apart by bombs, being asphyxiated, burnt to death, crushed to death. There's obviously no limit because we've seen hundreds of children killed in days, right? I mean, over those same 2-day period, roughly 300 Palestinians were killed. So you're talking about 125, 130 of them were children likely, right? So we know there's no limit for that. Hundreds of children can be killed in a day. And but in terms of, as we watch these children now starve to death, and God forbid some type of disease or pandemic sweeps through. They've somehow made it through the winter, start getting warmer there. So they'll be, they've escaped, I think, the great dangers of exposure. But now as it becomes the warmer months, now you're really going to start having issues of dehydration, and children will die of dehydration. They've already died of dehydration.
Diseases will start to ramp up when they get into the hotter season as well. And it's
exactly. Yeah. And so what will the United States do? If 100 children are starving to death a day in Gaza, as the aid trucks are lined up on the border, Israel refusing to let them in, what will the United States do? I mean, and I think we know the answer. They're not going to do anything. They're not going to do anything.
I got to hope and pray, Matt, that and a lot of the people who are watching our show today, and I don't think it's any shock that a lot of these kind of shows are on many channels. I've seen it with my own eyes, are being suppressed by YouTube algorithms. I mean, it's just the truth, and we know it. But some of our loyal followers still come here because there still are millions of Americans who feel just like you and I do, and we can only hope that whether it's through protest votes at these Super Tuesday or some of the other conference, or maybe protesting in the streets, whatever, but that we finally say, hey, enough is enough, man. Right. I mean, that should have been said months ago, but don't wait till this death toll just goes completely out of control, which I guess it still could get worse.
Right, exactly. And then we didn't even talk about what could happen with the West Bank. Certainly,
another whole show we could do on that one.
Right. And Lebanon, we've talked about Lebanon before, and the comments from Israel over the last couple of weeks for Lebanon just makes it seem much more likely. I think you had U.S. officials telling CNN that we believe that Israel will launch a war in Lebanon in late spring, early summer. So that's what American intelligence believes, is that they're preparing for that. And the Israelis are saying it. So it's not like these guys are, some real top-notch analysts or they're privy to information we don't have, because the Israelis themselves are saying that we're going to do this. Yeah. So.
Well, listen, Matt, I appreciate you coming on today. And as we wanted expected, you provided some real clarity and some sharp, cutting to the bone kind of reality here. These are the truths. I don't care what anybody likes. And I know that there's especially in some of the mainstream people, don't like to touch this because if you say anything against the Israeli government, somehow you get tarred with, all these epithets and all kinds of things. But look, it's time to not care about that when you're talking about life and death. And so we're going to continue to do these shows. We're going to continue having you talk about what's true, no matter what anybody wants to hear, because we are, after all, unintimidated and uncompromised on bringing the truth, no matter what it is. And we thank you for that today, Matt. Look forward to having you on as we continue to track this situation for our viewers.
All right. Thanks, Danny.
And we thank you guys. Please like and subscribe. And come back on this afternoon, because at 3:00 we're going to talk about Zelensky's deadly wishful thinking. Talk about hope that Matt was mentioning a minute ago. It was even related to this issue here. We're going to show you what's going on with that one as well. So come back at 3:00 today. Bring your friends and share them so they also have access to this information that you're just not going to get on the mainstream media. Thanks, and we'll see you this afternoon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.